KSLA News 12 has been highlighting local African Americans on our newscasts at 5 and 10 o'clock. I started that 6 years ago, and I think that's great to do for our local people because we always hear about the national figures, and they're important too, but it's very important, as Lynn said, that we highlight our local figures, and every day we've been highlighting local people in our African American community. It's very good to do that so that our kids and our students know that they have someone right here in the Shreveport-Bossier area to look up to. I'm going to introduce our panel in just a moment, but I want to start by saying what we're going to be talking about. This panel will speak on education, economics, health, and criminal justice. And I won't beat around the bush to tell you that last year we had nearly 40 homicides in this area. That's one too many. We shouldn't have any. And at the rate that we're going now with the armed robberies and murders, we will surpass that number if we continue. We have failing schools, and we need people to start taking action. And in order to take action, you have to be fully invested in the community. I think there's a senior citizen that will be recognized today who stands on the corner and puts up a sign to stop the killings. What can we do to help her? What can we do as a community? And that's why we're here today to discuss that. I'm going to begin with our panel and introduce them. We're going to begin with Dr. Ellen Velez. She's the second vice chair of Caddo's Democratic Party Executive Committee, as well as the medical consultant. Dr. Velez, thank you for being here. Ms. Mitty Farrow is a community activist. Thank you, Ms. Farrow. Calvin Lester, a professor at Jarvis College, as well as a former city councilman. Thank you, Mr. Lester. Rod Demery is a former Shreveport detective, also now a special investigator to the Caddo District Attorney's Office, and I'm sure you all know him. He's also the host of the new series on Discovery ID, Murder Chose Me. Thank you, Rod. Pastor Timothy Jones of Praise Temple. I'm sorry, Peaceful Rest. I did know that. He looked at me like, Peaceful Rest. Thank you, Dr. Jones. And Commissioner Lynn Cawthorn. All right. So I'm going to pose some questions to our panel, and then you can jump in and answer those questions to our panel, as well as the audience. If you would, please jot some questions down. There will be a part in the program where you will be able to come forward and ask questions of the panel as well. So if you could just start jotting some questions down, we will also take your questions as well. Let's begin with, since I messed up Dr. Jones' introduction, we're going to begin with you, Dr. Jones. I know that your church has deacons on patrol, or where they go out and they preach in the community or pray in the community for our community. What is the impact of the church? What has it been? We know that has been the cornerstone. How is it different today, and how can the church be more involved in the Black community?
Thank you so much, Dominique. Thank you, Mr. Cawthorn, for having me serve on this panel. I see the church as one piece to the puzzle, and I see several institutions: the church, the family, the academy, the community, and the marketplace. Often these institutions are blamed for a lot of things, but where I stand, and from my vantage point, it appears to me that these institutions did not fail us, we failed them. The average church in America only has about 60 members. The average weekly gift in America is only $17. So I think people place a lot of demands on the church with a lot of very limited resources. And as it relates, of course, we've got some programs, and every church has programs. But here's what I see as the challenge to what we've tried to do, particularly with young African-American males. Here's the challenge. At the end of the day, that boy does not want a preacher, a deacon, a coach, a principal, a mentor, a Boy Scout leader, at the end of the day, that boy wants his daddy. And we will never be able to do in 2 hours what that family is not doing in 168 hours. Should we do this? Yes, we should. But I recognize the limitations that we have. Somebody even asked, well, when there were a rash of shootings on Facebook, and I try not to get engaged with a lot of that, what's the church going to do? And I just had to say, the church is going to do what the church has always done, and that is teach and train the children whose parents bring them to be taught and trained.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to that? All right. I'm going to pose this next question to former Shreveport Detective Rod Demery. With nearly 40 homicides last year and a growing number of armed robberies, nothing burns me up more than to be in the newsroom and to hear on the scanner, or many of you have the KSLA News 12 alert, to say that there's been another armed robbery. And just the other night, we had one where the clerk was shot. And before that, we had one where it was attempted shooting of a clerk. And so things have been serious. They are getting even more serious. And I mean, Rod, what can we do? Why is there a rash in the increase? Do we need more officers on patrol? Is it a law enforcement issue? Is it a community issue?
Well, thank you for having me. It's actually a combination of things. My passion in my life's work has been in law enforcement. I have 31 years of police service. The last 16 years or so, I worked homicide in the city of Shreveport. I do believe that the problem is probably complicated in the minds of people when the problem is actually pretty simple. And you guys got to bear with me on this because this is a very dear and passionate subject to me. And I respectfully have to disagree with the fact that the police department, the churches and the schools are failed by the people. I think we failed them. There's an understanding that we must have in law enforcement, or any position that we take where we're responsible for the masses, is do your job. It's just that simple. The problem that I saw is a problem where I would go out and I would have to inform somebody that their child has died. I don't know that people can appreciate how difficult that is for not only the person making the notification, but everybody else in the community. Law enforcement requires very little. They need leadership, just as children need leadership, just as parishioners at churches need leadership. But when we fail them, where are they going to go? Without leadership, the people perish. It's just that simple. When you see crime rise and you hear about the numbers and the stats, crime is up, crime is down, who cares? It's what's happening right now that matters. I had a police officer, when I first started a long time ago, explain to me a very simple concept. He said, when the people in the community fear the criminals more than they respect you, you got a problem. It's slowly starting to fall apart, and it has done so over the years. Now, there are a lot of other social and political issues that are involved in that. That farce that they call the drug war, over-incarceration. But I think one of the biggest issues that I've seen is that the thought is that there's over-policing in black communities. The fact is it's under-policing. You see a lot of nonsense, a lot of harassing, but when it comes to somebody getting picked up for killing somebody's child, you see very little of that. Once we decide that we can create a deterrent, that means people are not going to go out and kill people if they know they're going to jail. The less likely it happens, the more likely they're going to commit crimes. It's just a fact of life.
All right. Thank you, Rod. And Ms. Farrow, if you would elaborate on this. Rod touched on an issue when people in the community fear the people out there doing these things. A lot of elderly and senior citizens, they live alone, they're afraid. People with young children, they're afraid to even let their children go outside.
My name is Mitty Farrow, and I live in the Allendale community. And I live where both seniors and young people live. And not too long ago, we had several murders and shooting in my community. Yes, the people who live there are frightened by the persons who are almost holding them prisoners. And the reason why they're holding them prisoners is because they know those young people. These are not visitors who come into our community who've never been there before. It's sometimes nephews, cousins, husbands who are doing this. And so I think once there was a song that went out, say, "Don't be a snitch, there's something will happen bad to you." So our young people are really afraid. As a senior, which I am, would I be afraid? Yes, I would be. Because when the police come, they come to where I live rather than going to where I'm telling them that the shooting is going on. They ask me on the phone, is it a black man? Or is it a white man? Somebody is shooting in the back of my building. I'm giving you the address. Can't you come? They ask me again, is it a black man or is it a white man? Where do you live? Mr., Miss, I'm telling you where it's going on. Please send someone to come. When I see an accident on the highway, the only thing I have to do is tell them, hey, it's North Market and Nelson. They know where that is. They don't ask me, is it a white lady who is in an accident, or is it a black woman or a man that's in an accident? They send the fire truck, and they send the police out. So yes, there is a stigma that goes on in our community. And it should be that when you call the police, somebody is there that perhaps you might recognize as an officer. But I've had black officers talk down to me as well as white officers. So when they come in with that kind of attitude, yes, you take a step back and you say to yourself, do I protect my own life? Or do I have them put me on the news and they say Mitty Farrow was the one that told them that who was the one that did the shooting. So then their cousin come back to kill Mitty Farrow, so I won't be able to even give my testimony to the judge and the jury. So yes, we have a right to be afraid. Something needs to happen with the policing department, is that people need to be trained how to interact with people in the community. So when they come into the community, yes, you're doing a job, or when they stop me and give me a ticket. They need to know how to say, may I see your driver's license, as well as I do know how to say, excuse me, officer, what happened? The officer tells me, I said, I'm going into my purse to get my driver's license and my insurance. Is that okay? Yes. Or if they ask me to step out the car, I step out of my car and I bring my purse with me because I have all of those things in my purse. So therefore, there has to become an interaction between the police as well as the people. Once upon a time, they were having community meetings, and the officers who were over our area, we were meeting down the lakeshore, and they were explaining to us what was going on, how to keep, as a senior, how to keep us safe. Well, they don't come anymore. So now we don't even know how to stay safe, except, I guess, not to tell, so you don't become the next victim.
Rod, is there a particular training program at the time when you were at Shreveport Police? I'm not sure about Caddo Sheriff's Office, but when you were with Shreveport Police, is there any particular training program to teach officers how to engage in the community?
Yeah, actually, there is, but that's, in my opinion, a waste of resource. It's just common decency. You should be able to treat people the way that you want to be treated. Ms. Farrell mentioned something that was something that bothers me quite a bit, and there's this myth that there's this no snitching whatever. That's garbage. No one wants to live in any neighborhood where their children are getting killed. It's just that simple. Nobody wants to live in a neighborhood where they can't walk back and forth to the store. But that nonsense has been sold to relieve the responsibility of the people who are supposed to protect you from that kind of stuff. As I said, if the people in the community fear the criminals more than they respect you, there's a problem. I don't know how to stress it enough when you talk about interaction with people. That's common decency. We don't need to train police officers how to do that, but we do need to check them when they don't. The power of the community is everybody has the ability to hold all these people accountable. Over the years, they slowly lose that because people start to splinter off. Our communities fail. Training, it exists.
All right.
Human decency.
All right. Mr. Lester?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say to the State of Black Shreveport, thank you for allowing me to participate in this very good panel. Mr. Cawthorn, this is a great event. The whole committee is to be commended. And before I say anything, I would be remiss if I did not recognize my provost and my vice president of academic affairs. That's her day job in Jarvis, but many of you know her as the pastor of St. Matthew AME Church, Dr. Glenelle Lee Pruitt over there. So I'd like to say hello to Dr. Pruitt. What I want to say is this, you know, I was fortunate enough to serve as a city councilman from 2002 to 2010. And the meetings that Ms. Farrow is speaking of is a program that former Mayor Cedric Glover started with the city council support called T-Bone, called Taking Back Our Neighborhoods Every Day. And basically what happened with that is you paired a code enforcement officer with a specific officer per neighborhood, community liaison officer, who was given a cell phone, who actually went out to the community and talked to people literally every day. They got to know people every day. You know, in my academic life at Jarvis, we talk about policing. Well, the father of modern policing is Sir Robert Peel. He had 9 concepts of policing, and one of those that is sacrosanct is the police are the people and the community are the police, which goes both to what Brother Demery is saying and Ms. Farrow is saying. You cannot police people that as an occupying force. That's what the military does. The police are a paramilitary organization, but they're not the military. The military sees enemies and it eradicates enemies. These are our community members. Policing works best when there is not a separation between the community and the police. And I can say, certainly during my time on the council, one of the things that was successful with helping to bring down the crime rate is that we had that community-oriented policing. And as a result, people felt comfortable picking up the phone and calling police officers. And in fact, they didn't call 911, they called their community resource officer. Hers was Dunn. Remember Dunn? And she had Dunn's cell phone number, and she would call him and say, Dunn, this is going on. Like I said, I served in the Allendale MLK area. I gave up the offices that I had, both in the Lakeside Recreational Center and the David Rain Center in Martin Luther King community, to have officers in the community centers, so that it would not be a situation, because a lot of people want to give police information, but they don't want to be seen having a police officer come to their car. Everybody goes to the rec center. They might be there to play basketball. They might be there to knit quilts or something of that nature. They can give the police the information that they need so they can do their job. When people feel comfortable, which is exactly what Brother Demery was saying, when people feel comfortable with the police, they're going to give them the information. And I literally saw instances where a crime was committed on Tuesday, somebody called that afternoon, and the person was picked up that next day, because they used their community liaison officers. Why we've gotten away from that, I don't know. It could be a budget issue. It could be a leadership issue. I don't know why. I'm not down there anymore, but I would suggest it was a successful program, and at some point, we need to go back to it.
Commissioner Cawthorn, is there something that the parish, the city, can do as far as the budget? How can you all intervene with law enforcement, providing more funds, more programs?
Well, you have a situation where you got intergovernment agencies. So the city of Shreveport is the primary policing force for Shreveport proper. We essentially govern everything outside of the city limits, inside the parish. So, but to answer your question, what we could do, we can enter into what is called an intergovernment arrangement where, if, for an example, Shreveport wants to police the inner city and help us support and ask us to support the perimeter, that's something that we can do. Obviously, our budgets are totally separate, but we have, at the latter part of last year, donated about $175,000 to the police department to help them buy new cars. There may be some other resources we can lend, but we are willing to sit down and have a across-the-table conversation with the city of Shreveport. 'Cause at the end of the day, Caddo Parish, it consists of 75% of it Shreveport. All right.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control reported in 2012, Caddo was ranked 4th in the nation for syphilis cases. Caddo was the parish with the second most number of people infected with gonorrhea. Caddo ranked just below East Baton Rouge and Orleans in the number of people infected with chlamydia, and 95% of the new HIV diagnoses in Louisiana last year were made in Caddo. That's 95%. I'm going to pose this question to Dr. Velez. Why do you think these numbers are so high in Caddo? What are some things that we can do in our area to slow the spread of STDs?
It's in the general population, didn't separate gender.
They didn't separate gender.
Part of the problem part of the problem is education. Part of the problem is cultural, on how we approach sexuality with our children, with ourselves, how we talk about sexual health, sexual education. The other problem is access to health care, access to sexually transmitted infection screenings. Part of the problem, and it makes it more complicated, is that the laws of medicine are actually governed by the 50 states. Although we take a national exam, I take the same exam in Louisiana as the people who take the exam in New York State, but our licenses are governed by each state. So each state has its own set of laws regarding healthcare. And people don't understand this and why it's so complicated. In regards to the state of Louisiana, we have a very conservative legislature. And I can tell you that there are activists fighting, trying to get people to discuss sexual education in a appropriate, age-appropriate, comprehensive manner. So that's one way, is education. The other problem is that within the community, the parents, your community leaders, your elected officials, we really need to have a frank conversation on how we promote sexual health. And also, it also comes down to money, the budget. Do we have budgets to screen high-risk populations? My husband is an infectious disease specialist in Shreveport, one of the few private practicing HIV specialists. And the problem has gotten so bad that despite his busy schedule, it's night, and he provides free HIV care once a month at the Martin Luther King Community Center. And he tells me that the wait is like months long. And so and with the current presidential administration that we have now, this is going to get worse. In particular, in the South, where we have the stigmata of talking about HIV, talking about these STIs, So we as a community, we have to really figure out on how to promote education, to raise awareness that this is a problem, because we can't have our black, in particular black males, dying. Not only do we have to worry about the shooting, but we also have to worry about the HIV, because we have a lot of the, how can I say this, patients, clients, are having sex, unprotected sex, and spreading this around, and endangering women, endangering children. The rates are exponential, and this is still an epidemic. I mean, I cannot tell you how heart-wrenching it is to hear the stories. And myself, I donated 2.5 years of my free time to promote and to screen bisexual and gay men, and to raise awareness that you really need to protect yourselves. It's not a judgment call. This is a public health issue.
So you're saying that the wait at the MLK Center is a month just to get the test?
I think it's just the long wait time just to see him, to get that testing, the treatment, get that testing and the treatment. Mm-hmm. Because the other issue is, like with the Clinton administration, because I was in medical school in the 90s, and this is when the treatment, AZT, in 1996, a whole range of antiretrovirals were coming out to treat HIV. Now, this was under administration that believed that this was a public health issue. So the budgets were increased, the money was there for the research, the cultural climate was there for doctors to discuss this, for us to be taught in the medical schools. But now, and of course on the Obama administration, again, the money was there to promote, and because he knows that the HIV problem particularly hits the African American community highest, okay? So, but now we have a current administration. Do you actually believe that this is going to be a priority? So this is something to think about. Not only think about what's at the White House, but also to think about your local elected officials, who your councilmen are, in particular regarding medicine, who your state legislators are in your district. I highly recommend to go to the, I think it's the state website, state legislative website, and find out who your representative is, who is your state senator. Because in reality, it's the state legislature that dictates our lives on a daily basis. Like, who we have access to, the Medicaid expansion, again, sexual education, budgets for hospitals, for LSU, that's all on the table. That's not Washington, D.C., that's in Baton Rouge. And if you don't become part of the discussion, you're going to be on the menu. So you rather be at the table, or do you want to be part of or do you want to be the menu? That's something to think about.
One last question for you, Dr. Velez, because we hear this all the time now. People are saying, well, I'm not seeing a lot of people dying from HIV or AIDS because they have medicine now. So if I get it, I'll just take medicine and I will live a healthy and normal life. I've heard that so many times.
Okay. Well, part of that is true. The medicines are there. If you're a compliant patient, you can live a very healthy and long life. However, if there are budget cuts to the state, which will make access maybe to federal money, like you have the, I'll get the name right, Ryan White laws that allow federal monies to come in to get people with HIV and AIDS treated. If you have that cut, then there won't be medicines. Then it's going to be up to nonprofits like the Philadelphia Center here in Shreveport. Then the burden's going to be on these nonprofit organizations and private donations to have resources for the people to A, get testing, and B, to get treated in a timely manner. But if you don't have that money, then it will be more difficult to have access to these medicines, to have access to this screening. And the other problem, which my husband pointed out, that a lot of the doctors who were there at the beginning of the HIV and AIDS epidemic, they're retiring and dying. And it's difficult to recruit people to get involved into infectious disease because it's not that glamorous, it's not as high-powered as your cardiovascular specialist or your cardiothoracic surgeon or your GI specialist because they're procedural, it's sexy. ID is not sexy, although it deals with sex all the time. And then the other issue, too, is a lot of the burden has to fall on your primary care doctors, your internists, your family physicians. They have to know. If we're getting less and less experts, and then the burden's going to fall on them to have the knowledge when somebody comes in, either A, based on their history, it's saying that he or she has high-risk behavior, or the patient comes in, I think I may have contracted HIV, what do we do? So, I mean, it's a complex issue. But I talk about HIV because, like, I think someone was saying about mental illness. Again, there's a stigmata in the African American community to talk about it. You get patients, well, I'm not gay. It doesn't matter. This is what the test showed. This is what needs to be done. And you need to protect yourself and make sure you don't spread it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Velez. I'm going to jump on education here for a moment. Recently, the Caddo Parish School Board approved plans to merge Booker T. Washington and Fair Park High School. The superintendent announced plans that there will be more closures to follow, and this, of course, has sparked outrage between these two schools and the community. Where was the outrage through year 1 through 10 when these schools were failing? This is a big issue with our failing schools. You want to touch on that, Commissioner? Yeah. Or anybody else on the panel want to touch on the failing schools here in Caddo Parish and that particular merger? Because we know they're rivals, and we know that they have a very popular alumni base, and everybody wants to stay at their own school. I can't imagine bringing two rivals together, two schools with historic value over the years, a lot of history.
Well, I'm not an educator, nor do I play one on television, but I am a man that can count to 10, and I've got a little common sense. When you look at the footprint of what has happened in the inner cities and in Shreveport, there's a population base of students moving from the inner city schools to schools west and south of town. And so I guess in a practical sense, to preserve dollars, it may be practical to merge the two schools together. But being an alumnus of Booker T. Washington High School and having friends who are graduates of Fair Park, I do know that there is some angst about someone's high school going away. And so the issues are very challenging. You're looking at progress and also preservation. You're looking at how do we move the school system forward with shrinking resources, but how do we preserve the legacy of our different high schools? And those challenges become very difficult. I just think it's a situation where as we move forward, as we redefine a footprint of schools here in the city of Shreveport, that we have a very intuitive discussion with both the administration and the people that live in those districts, because there is shrinking population in the inner cities, shrinking resources, and I'll be honest with you, there are people with M&M transfers who are transferring out of schools or quote unquote failing to other schools, and that's shrinking that population. So we've got some challenges here. There's no silver bullet. I just think we all need to come to the table, be practical, and come up with some solution that'll be a win-win for everybody involved. And at the end of the day, it's about kids, it's about kids, it's about kids.
Okay. Rod?
Allow me to draw some lines of correlation here. If you're building a house, you need a solid foundation. The basic problem, whether it's education, promiscuity, infectious disease, is a problem of hopelessness. We, for whatever reason, don't want to face that fact. When you have a 15, 16-year-old adolescent child that has just watched their friend, their brother, their sister get killed, that lends to mental health, post-traumatic stress syndrome, all kinds of fears, all kinds of insecurities. They can't learn. They're distracted. You can only do one right thing at a time. When you talk about their promiscuity, if they're seeing all this happen, their families are splintered, they don't have any support systems. The only thing they have control of is their body and receiving some sort of pleasure. Many of them view sex as love. Now, I understand, and I don't want to seem as if though I'm oversimplifying things. I understand all the political struggles, I understand all the educational struggles that they're having with the school systems, and it's important. It's a very important issue. But until we become able to set a foundation where there's basic safety, and I don't know how to stress that enough. Basic safety should be the first premise. You can't explain to a child that, you probably need to study harder, or this is going on in your school system, or you need to vote, or you need to not have sexual encounters, when their basic fear is whether or not they're going to make it to the next day. It's a real fear. When they're afraid that they're going to be arrested, harassed, or beat by the police, lay a foundation, a simple foundation. I've heard people say many times about, it starts in the home. Well, maybe there's not a home. And again, as Dr. Jones said, they want a father. Well, my grandfather used to tell me, because I didn't have one, he said, people in hell want ice water. We deal with the issues that are at hand. The basic issue for any population is basic safety. Just a couple of weeks ago, a 15-year-old child was murdered. A week before that, somebody was murdered. This is a continuing cycle. Until we do one thing right at a time, or address one issue at a time, we're going to see all these different splinters of issues. We're going to have education problems. We're going to have housing problems. We're going to have promiscuity amongst teenagers, because we've lost it. I was invited here, and I certainly wasn't invited here to be political or nice, and I think Mr. Marshall understands that. That's probably why I had me come up here. My frustration is from what I see, and I try to be a little more diplomatic as I get older, but you can't expect a baby to understand all these things, and the institutions that they rely on for their basic safety fails them. If this child's going to church, and the pastor is doing inappropriate things to her, her teacher is doing, or his teacher, or the police are harassing them, we failed them. It's just that simple. Everybody in this city and everybody in this room, your first priority is to provide basic safety for our children.
Thank you, Rod. Go ahead, Cal.
On that same note, I want to say on the education piece, Shreveport has never had a problem producing talent. There are some tremendously talented individuals in this town. Unfortunately, too often to practice your talent, you have to get in a car, go across the state lines, get in an airplane, and go something like that to give back that which God has put in you. I think as we look at the educational system in Caddo Parish, I think the challenge that we have is that we have to look inward. I think we have to put the mirror up to ourselves. There are a lot of smart people, a lot of great teachers in this system. I think as parents, we need to do a better job of supporting our teachers. We need to do a lot better job of coming up and being involved in the education of our children before something bad happens. You know, it's easy for everybody to come to the school board when they're going to close your school, and everybody gives, the speech, I love my institution and the whole 9 yards. But where were you during the period of time where, things started to go bad? I mean, the wheels just don't fall off automatically. There's a slow period of decline. And we have some responsibility to come up with some solutions. There was a time where we could, say that, well, it's the white folks. They did this and they're not allowing us to do this. But here's the reality. Shreveport is 52%, 53% African American. There are approximately 20,000 more African Americans than whites in the city of Shreveport. Caddo Parish is approximately 48% African American. By the next census, the parish will be majority black. If you look at our boards, whether it be the school board, whether it be the Caddo Parish Commission, whether it be the city council, the majority of the districts are African American, and both the commission and the school board are split down the middle 50-50. So it's no longer an issue that we are not being allowed to do what's necessary. We as a community have to come forward with solutions. We can't continue to elect people, and I know a little something about this. We can't continue to elect people because that's my frat brother, that's my sorority sister, I like him, they go to church. Our politics cannot continue to be based on popularity. Our politics has to be based on production. When you are elected to a job, you have a responsibility to bring resources to your neighborhood for a certain period of time. Every 4 years, we grade your paper. Did you do well? Send you back. If you don't, you go home. We have some of the longest serving folks in our communities and a lot of these boards. But when you ask the question, is there a correlation between your service and what your neighborhood looks like? There is not one. There is no way in the world that you should call yourself an elected official and haven't been in a particular area for a particular period of time, or 10 or 15 years, and your neighborhood looks the same. How are you a school board member and your schools are constantly going in decline, but we continue to elect you? My grandmother would say, you the fool at that point. And at a certain point, we've got to get past this. We cannot continue to, what is it? If you do the same thing, you get the same result. That's the definition of insanity. At a certain point, folks, you have to take the power and start holding your elected leaders responsible. And if they don't do the job, send them home, period. We cannot, because there are smart people in this town. There is a cadre of smart young people in this town that have advanced degrees, that have a tremendous amount of experience. At a certain point, we need to start finding some of those people and put some of our best and brightest in some of these positions. And let's be honest, we have not, in a lot of instances, elected our best and brightest and put them in position of power. No, we haven't. Okay? And when you don't do that, you can't, I love my children. They'll be 15 on Tuesday. I wouldn't put my children in charge of anything. They're 15. Not anything important. They don't have the experience. They don't have the mindset. They don't have the preparation. We need a cadre of prepared people in these positions. Did you know right now, I think maybe with one exception, there's not a single school board member that has a child in the system? Let that marinate for a second. People are making education policy and it doesn't affect them. You wouldn't allow me to be your city councilman and live in Bossier. You wouldn't let me be your parish commissioner and be in New Orleans or outside no. You would want to make sure that the policies that I enacted, I had to go home at night and deal with some of that homework. I had to go home at night and deal with some of that stuff. At a certain point, we as a community have to take responsibility for our own and do something about it. These things don't happen overnight. This job is hard. These jobs are hard. This is real work. And we have to treat it like real work. And instead of having popularity contests, maybe we should start doing job interviews.
All right, thank you, Calvin.
May I say something?
Sure.
Just to put things in perspective, I pulled out, this is from the Kaiser Family Foundation, the distribution of medical student graduates by race, ethnicity in the state of Louisiana. These are people who graduated from medical school. In the entire state, 15 of those medical school graduates were black. 363 of those medical students were white. 15 to 363. In a state where the population of African Americans, let's see, about 32%. That should put you in perspective. And then I remember listening to Mr. Lester. I remember a teacher who was also a parent in my daughter's old elementary school, and he was saying, how do you support the teachers? And I remember her saying, I don't want a gift card, I want my retirement plan. What is the question? How do you best support teachers? One is parents. It starts at the home, making sure our children do what they're supposed to be doing, their homework, studying. The other thing too is, again, and again this relates to Mr. Lester, you have to know what's going on in Baton Rouge. You have to know what's going on with your state legislators. They continue to cut benefits for your teachers. Right now, they're debating. There's a special legislative session going on right now in terms of budget cuts. The governor wants to use the rainy day fund, the rainy day fund to help with the budget deficit. And we have other politicians that don't want to use the rainy day fund, but they want to cut education. For the LSU, for other schools. This is what's happening. Again, we have people in Baton Rouge dictating our lives. And it's like Mr. Lester was saying, there has to be something done. A, you have to be aware, and you have to hold your elected officials accountable. Because it's a vicious cycle, because you're gonna see parallels. You're gonna see in the African American community how poverty is related to lack of education, how lack of health is related to economic disparity. It's all related. If you're not healthy, you can't work. If you're not healthy, you can't get educated. If you can't get educated, you can't get a job. If you can't get a job, you can't buy insurance. It's a vicious cycle, and we have to ask ourselves as a community, I'm not African American, I'm Latina, but still, I come from a very humble background and still managed to overcome many obstacles to graduate with a doctorate of medicine. Not very easy. So again, with those numbers, we only got 15 African Americans in the entire state graduating with a doctorate of medicine. You have to ask yourselves, what can we do about this? How can we stop this vicious cycle? Again, this is related to the shootings, economic disparity, that crime. This is all related. It's like a circle. We have to ask ourselves, how do we stop the vicious, how do we stop this unending cycle? The killing of our black men, the dying of our children, the lack of access, African American women, breast cancer, the rates of breast cancer deaths are higher in black women, cervical cancer deaths are higher in black women. Again, it's all related. How do we solve that problem? Not an easy one. to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Velez. We'll start taking some questions from the audience if you'd like to come forward and we can give you the mic, or if you'd like to pass your questions down to the end of the table, we'll have somebody pick your questions up. But while we do that, if you'd start to do that, while we do this, I'm going to ask a question to Dr. Jones about neighborhood schools. Should we go back to neighborhood schools? Meaning, before I ask, you want to? Okay. Can I just ask this one question, just to pose this really quick to set the scene, and then we'll get to you, Ms. Farrow. The question is, should we go back to our neighboring schools, neighborhood schools? This is the first place I've lived, and I'm not trying to knock anything that Caddo is doing, where different schools, you can opt out and go to another school. So in a sense, we're taking so many children out of our failing schools and they're going to other schools. And I'm not saying everybody that's left at the failing schools is making the schools fail, but if we take those children that are at the Byrd, the Shreves, and move them back, would that help with the percentage to get those numbers up? Should we go back to, if you're in the district for Byrd, if you're in the district for Fair Park, Huntington, Booker T, that's where you go to school?
My answer to that question would be absolutely. There are people who believe that almost all of Caddo's educational issues are go away, or at least are minimized if we went to neighborhood schools. We created this monster. When you take the best and brightest children from the entire parish and put them on 6 or 8 campuses, you have effectively taken the top of the bell curve off of all of the other schools. And that's what's happened. The system is broken. I think most people recognize that. But here's the other thing that happens if we go to all neighborhood schools. Magnet High no longer exists. Byrd and Captain Shreve will then have the smallest population in the entire parish. When I was in high school, Byrd only had about 500 students, and there was conversation about closing Byrd. Then the conversation becomes, if we go to all neighborhood schools, everybody goes to where they're supposed to. Huntington might have almost 3,000 students if we went to all neighborhood schools. Then the conversation becomes closing either Byrd or Captain Shreve, or at least merging Byrd or Captain Shreve. And the thought is, we'd rather see the whole system go down the drain before touching schools on the east side of Line Avenue. That's the sentiment here in Caddo Parish. The whole magnet concept has outlived its usefulness. It's a concept that was forwarded over 35 years ago to fix a problem that existed 60 years ago, and today's context has completely changed. For instance, why would M&M transfers be needed in a school district that's 70% black? That's something that was provided better than 30 years ago. It's outlived its usefulness. So that's what happens. We see that across the river. In Bossier, we see that in DeSoto Parish, we see that in some other places, even some of the more affluent parishes down south. The issues Caddo has are not fair because of their commitment to neighborhood schools. And then the other, here is a recent conversation. Pastor Jones, children only have 3 or 4 minutes to get to class. Wow, that's not very long. When do the children go to their lockers? Pastor Jones, the children don't have lockers. Well, where do the children store their books? Pastor Jones, the children have no books. I was literally floored. Literally floored. Went to a high school graduation. The valedictorian says, our class had 4 different principals. We had 10 different math teachers. And we have to deal with equity and in terms of resources. I think what's happened in Caddo Parish is we bragged about having, here again, 6 or 8 of the best schools in the state, a couple of the best schools in the nation, but we destroyed 30 or 40 schools to create that. Let me tell you, 71106 is where our church is. It's where I was born and reared. Cedar Grove, more specifically, 3 of the best schools anywhere are in Cedar Grove: Caddo Middle Magnet, Eden Gardens, and Fairfield. 4 of the best schools anywhere, when you add South Highland, are all in 71106. 3 of the best schools anywhere are in Cedar Grove, and the children in Cedar Grove can't go to those schools.
Thank you for putting that in perspective, Dr. Jones. I'll get to you in just a moment. Ms. Farrow wanted to mention something about how we got to failing schools within that 1 to 10 year span.
My name is Mitty Farrow. Some of you I have touched personally. I've shook your hand, introduced myself. I'm an activist. I live in the Allendale area. I came out of the MLK area as well. And I was here when the failing began. Where were you? Where were you? I started, knew Mrs. our mayor. She was doing a fine job. My hat was off to her. She tried to do our schools and make them better. People who sat on the school board tried to kill her. They did, with words and voting against all the things she wanted to do about our school. So when they invited the most illustrious Mr. Robert Schiller, he promised to take our school system to a high degree. He did. He started closing them down. They began to give them some alphabets that our children were not familiar with. And then along came Mr. Dawkins. We spent a lot of money with Mr. Schiller because he did, I think, $1 million program trying to tell us why our schools was failing, and everybody on the school board was saying, we've got the right person now. Dr. Schiller is all that we need. We began to close down the black schools. We began to say, how prominent everything was going to be with Dr. Schiller. Dr. Schiller left, and then up comes Dr. Dawkins, a man from my own home state, Michigan. We're going to make Shreveport the greatest schools in America. Wow. So he changed all the names of the schools in the black community whose names meant something and gave them some names that meant nothing. So yes, he did say that we're going to work hard. We're going to do all of this. Nothing ever happened. He walked in Mr. Schiller's footprints, and then the schools became a D school, a F school, and there are very few C schools in the black area. Schools began to close down in the MLK area. I sat on one of the boards that was out in my community, and I went to the school board, and we begged them to give Newton Smith and make them a magnet school. Newton Smith became a school that was year-round, just like one of those prestigious schools off of Lyon Avenue, where they have a waiting list. Finally, they closed down Newton Smith because they said it wasn't working. Isn't that amazing? Wasn't working. And then, when they began to close the schools down in the black community, I'm going to ask you again, where were you? Booker T. Washington now. I want this young man, someone have a child come and pass out these, because I want you to know the truth. You were not at the school board meeting. I'd like to have this young lady here pass these out. You weren't at the school board meeting. You were not there, and all of you, except for about 4 people, I have to stand up because I'm short, except for about 4 people in here look just like me. Why weren't you fighting for your neighbor's child to get a good education? My hat is off to Pastor Jones because he opened up his school, opened up his church so that they could come and tell the truth. We were not afraid to stand before the people and tell them why your children mean so much to the other schools, the magnet schools. I'm going to tell you why little black kids mean so much to the magnet school. Not because they're that smart. Some of them are, and my hat's is off to them. Because every black child that come to school that look just like me comes with some money. The government furnishes for them to be there. Oh, we're so excited to have you here, darling. Oh, that's why we love you so. And Dr. So-and-so is going to write a grant about you. You came out of a 97 and 9/10% poverty-stricken community. They are shooting in your neighborhood, aren't they? Oh, yes, ma'am. Were you afraid to go to school? Yes, ma'am. Those children stand on the corner at 6:30 a.m. waiting for the bus to come. Suppose the bus don't come. They're there till 7:30. Supposing 3 pedophiles come along and try to steal little black children that look just like me, put them in a car and rape them and kill them. Oh, now you're going to say it's the fault of the parents. They should have been watching their children. Well, I got news for you. Those young people work 2 jobs. How much money are they making? With 2 jobs, they make $16 an hour. Takes 2 jobs to do that. All of you guys make more than that in a day. Hello? I got an audience out there. I want to wake you up. So while we brag about our children going to the magnet school and the other little children whose parents can't come because they're busy trying to make a living, yes, a lot of them is receiving aid, they get food stamps, but does that make them any less than you and I who make big money? No, it doesn't make them any less. Do their children need a good education? Yes, they do. When are we going to do like they used to do? That every person that lived in the community say, I'll fight for those children. I am 82 years old, and you know what? Every day I go in my community, I know those young people, I tell them, you don't have to go. I'll go down to the school board, I'll fight for you. I was at Pastor Jones' church. I fought for those children to try to get a better education. What do we need to do? Clear the school board. Fire Mr. Goree. I gave you a piece of paper that tells you. He said, I don't give a Jack Daniels about Booker T. I don't care about Fair Park. Fair Park, had they have been able to go and do the test, which they did, well, all of the numbers went in before they got Fair Park's test. Fair Park was now a C school, but by what Mr. John White said, he didn't know. He didn't know. He didn't know about Fair Park. He doesn't know anything about Booker T. He doesn't know anything about Green Oaks, where I live. It was not one person from Booker T to represent Booker T. Lanier closed down because some highfalutin folks said, oh, we can run it. Closed it down. Closed down the schools in our area where our children were walking to school. You don't know about some of the groups that they have who have no teaching background, who are coming into our schools substituting. Are they making money? Yes, they are. Why? Because our children are bad. And it takes somebody to come up in these schools who can deal with these little bad children. No child is bad. He's uneducated. What is our responsibility? To make sure the little Johnnies and the little Susies, that they get an education. We owe that to them. And you know why we owe it to them? Because you're sitting here looking at me saying, oh, Ms. Fair, I don't go with that. But supposing one of those young men had a baby by your daughter. Now that's your grandbaby, isn't it? Uneducated Johnny. Wow. But it's your grandbaby now. So what are you going to do? That's why it pays for us to speak up for these children. Don't get carried away by Byrd. Don't get carried away by the magnet schools. Do you know why we're doing all of that now? 4,000 white children. That's a big number, isn't it? Left the public school system. Every white church, almost in Shreveport, has a school system. Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. They have a school system. K through 12. The school way out on Linwood, Calvary, K through 12. 1,000 students. So now we got 3 more thousand that's in the different schools. And I applaud people who can send their children to the private schools. I applaud you. But here's what I say. Don't forget where you came from. We have not always been like this. And I know we haven't, because I'm 82 years old. We have not always been educated. We have not always had the best jobs. Did you hear the number that woman said? How many other people who don't look like us was being doctors? 15 black folk became a doctor. Come on now. We ought to be ashamed that we are not grooming each one of these children here to become the best that they can be. We really put your cell phones down and listen to me. You ought to be ashamed. You shouldn't be able to sleep at night to know that you haven't done something. Did the church fall behind? I can't leave the church out. Yes, they did. The church stopped having Sunday school, stopped going out having vacation Bible school. Them children too bad, they ain't gonna tear up our church. Wow, ain't gonna tear up your church. If God bless you to build it, surely you ought to be out there in that neighborhood. And I know it's some pastors here, but guess what? I'm in ministry too. I've been called to help to save the lost, the downtrodden, and those who have lost their way. And each one of you have been called to do that as well. You don't need a REV by your name, nor the doctorate behind your name. You don't need that. You just need a love for these children to get them educated so that you'll be proud. Yes, Shreveport can be the next great city. We've got everything, but we don't have education. And that's what's stopping the big companies from coming here. That's why they're not coming. An illiterate city, an illiterate state of stupid people will stop prosperity. We want prosperity. I want you to wake up. I want you to leave. When you leave here, you say, that little short, stupid black woman told me some stuff that I didn't know. I want you to wake up. If all those schools where our children go to had somebody to say something good to them, do you not know that the children who live in the 97 and 9-10% poverty-stricken area would come away feeling like they are somebody? Do you know that? Do you understand what I'm trying to get you to understand right now? Is that this is our last chance. Some of us will die. We are on our way back to slavery. I'm going to throw this in parenthetically. I won't raise an offering for it. The young man now who is our president, he don't give a jack about you. He don't care anything about your degrees behind your name. He don't care. The man we had cared. He was trying to help us. He was trying to help us. So you got to wake up and understand who you are and where you are. I love my white brothers and sisters who are sitting out there. Some of you I know personally. I don't have a problem with it. But let me tell you, roll up your sleeves and fight the fight with us. Help us get back to where we need to be. You can see this is a journey that all Shreveport, not just black, not just white, but all Shreveport needs to be working. An uneducated person cannot get a good job. So you're going to go to criminality. Wake up, Shreveport. If we don't wake up, we are on our way back to enslavement again. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Farrow.
Dominique, very briefly, I want to say one thing. Whether we change people on the school board, whether we change superintendents, this public school system is 75% black. What we need to begin to do is look outside of this city and look at models that work. I want everybody to go home and look up urban prep out of Chicago, 100% college acceptance rate. Every kid in the school looks like the state of Black Shreveport. Now you'll get that on the way home. Urban prep, Chicago, 100% acceptance rate. We got to just get to the point that the people sitting to the left of you and sitting to the right of you, they don't have to be white for you to get an education. They don't have to be of another nationality. We've got to get comfortable. If we're going to be in the inner city and we're going to improve, we got to get comfortable that excellence exists among people that look just like us.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawthorn. Sir, if you'd give us your name, your question, and who you pose the question to on the panel.
My name is Marcus Mitchell, and I guess because I have to ask a question before I make a comment, my question is, why do we tiptoe around the solutions to the issues? And that's posed to everyone that's on the panel. And I will follow that question up with comments. I made notes throughout the discussion, so I'll try to be brief on each one of them. First and foremost, the issue, all the issues that's related to the black condition in Shreveport and all across America has one root problem. And we address each issue. Those are merely a symptoms to a disease. We have to figure out how to fight the disease itself. And the issue that causes the disease is a lack of education. When we're shipped over here, we're stripped of education, stripped of knowledge of self, stripped of education. It was outlawed for you to teach a slave to read. The reason why is because without education, a person doesn't know how to attain the means by which to provide for himself. If we're going to address any of these issues, we have to address education first and foremost. And although it may be a little distasteful, it might come off as being disrespectful, but from my perspective, the civil rights leaders of the 1960s, they were wrong in their method or in their goals for the education system. We got ourselves, I don't know what that is. Somehow we got ourselves out of captivity, but then we took our kids and gave them back to the oppressor and said, teach them your ways. Teach them how you teach your kids. That's perverted to me, or whatever. We should get back to teaching our own kids. And the way by doing that is to develop our own schools. Like Mr. Cawthorn was saying, Urban Prep is a private school. Build our own private schools within our communities, within our churches. You don't need but 25 to 50 students across community schools is what we need. As long as we keep on going to our school board and demanding of a system that wasn't designed to teach our kids, we look like fools. The education system is not broken. It's operating exactly as it was intended. It was never intended to teach the African American anything but to be a worker within America. So it's working perfectly fine. It's creating workers, and it's creating bodies within the penal institutions as well. So stop tiptoeing around the issues and address it head on. And the issue and the solution has always been rooted in education. And if you pretend that it's something else, then you're lying to yourself or you're just misinformed.
How can we address the solution of education when I know that you said that the education system is not broken, but we are broke? Louisiana is broke, the education system. So how can we create an urban prep like in Chicago if we have no money?
Good question. That's why you create a peaceful rest prep. You create a...
Is it that easy to create, Dr. Jones?
Well, let me say this. There are some things in place there at our church and in a lot of churches. The meeting that we recently had at the church that Ms. Farrow mentioned, and I'm not here to blame anybody. There's enough blame for everybody. But here's what I had to say at the end of the whole conversation. There are parents in the room, there are churches in the room, there are pastors in the room, there are community leaders, everybody's in the room. But the only folk in the room with $500 million is Caddo Parish School Board. Mm-hmm. So resources are going to be vital, going to be very, very, very critical. How we get those, I'm not really sure how we go about doing that, but it takes resources, lots of resources.
Can I say something?
That black folks in New Orleans at this All-Star game spending thousands of dollars this weekend. Think about that when you go home.
All right. Calvin.
I was just going to say, I understand, and I believe that I'm not willing to walk away from the investment that my forefathers have bled and died for in terms of the Caddo Parish school system. We paid our money. We put our blood, sweat, and tears into the situation. I don't want to just, say that they can keep their stuff and go home. I want them to fix what's going on because I want what's mine. I went to one of the best neighborhood schools in the world, Eden Gardens Elementary. My principal was the late, great Mavis Swalet. They named the library after her. She was one of the best principals in the world, period. When we were in the 4th grade, she wanted to take a group of kids from Cedar Grove to Dallas to see the ruins of Pompeii. So you know what they did? They put their money together. They got us sack lunches. They got 6 buses, and everybody from Eden Gardens one Saturday morning got on a bus with parents. We went to Dallas to see the ruins of Pompeii in the Dallas Metropolitan History Museum. We walked around with our parents and with chaperones from Eden Gardens, Cedar Grove, saw that and came back. That was over 40 years ago, and I still remember that. So I refuse to believe this idea that we can't have great neighborhood schools. I think that what we need to do is demand that the check that has been written to us be honored. That's what I want to do. Now, do I believe that we can have urban preps? Yes. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all, but I don't think that we need just to walk away from the school system. I think we need to make the school system work for us. And to the extent that it hasn't, we need to demand that it does. And if we need to put people down there to make the system work for us, there are some people in this room who could probably do a heck of a job of making the system work for us.
Thank you, Mr. Lester. I believe that concludes this panel. Lynn, thanks. Thank you for your question and concern, sir. And thank you all for coming out. There will be another panel coming up, but this for, yes, Rod? Go ahead, Rod.
Just a quick word on education, I'm not an educator. But back in the 60s when the civil rights movement was the biggest deal was integration. That's because they were wise enough to know that separate was never equal. It was more about having our children blend with everyone else's children. The theory behind it, or the thought behind it is that they're not going to allow their children to live and learn in certain environments, so we were included in it. So I understand what Marcus Mitchell was saying, but my opinion is that that's what we need to do. Everyone has to be in the same bowl. When you start to splinter it off, separate, then you start to see the disadvantages of one and the advantages of the other.
Thank you, Rod. We're going to take one more question. Sure.
Let me just say this.
Ms. Humphrey, go ahead and come on up.
We cannot live in a box. You can't do that, okay? Our 4 parents who came before and knew that our children needed a global education. A global education is being able to hold your own whether or not you're in a school that's 97% white or in a school where there's only 3% white and 97% black. We have to learn how to live among each other. Our school, every school in Shreveport should be teaching Spanish. Spanish is our second language. Little kids who are coming into school need to start at the third, when they're 3 years old, by 4 years old, they need to be taught Spanish so that wherever they go, they're able to communicate. If we go back to raising our children in a box, we're going to go back to the hatred of black and white rather than teaching them to learn how to get along one with another. That should be our primary focus. We can do it. So if we have to talk about shutting schools down, then we're going to have to make centralized school where all children can go. All children can go. Spanish is the language we need to be teaching them. All children, black principals, white principals, all working together for the same reason, is that these children get an education. And then we will not have 97 and 9/10% poor children, poor black communities, and people feeling sorry for us. We need to be grooming young people so that they too can make $10, $15, $20, $30, $50, $60,000, $10 an hour, $15 an hour, more than what they're making now. We are just happy with $6 an hour. Why? Because we don't have the education to ask for more.
Thank you.
So when we get an education, we can ask for more money.
Thank
Y'all
you,
need
Ms.
to get
Farrow.
on that. Thank you.
We have another session that will deal with education at 12:45, so we can continue that discussion. Ms. Humphrey, really quick, and we'll try to get that question answered for you.
Thank you so much to our distinguished moderator and to our panel that are here. I wanted to particularly talk about something that you said, Dr. Jones, and then Mr. Lester, briefly. I totally agree with your numbers. The number of children that have gone out of the community. I represent the Green Oaks Alumni Association right now, and we are doing many of the grassroots things. I think we have to get in the grassroots. You don't have to be a public servant to serve the public, and sometimes we're beholden, if we're elected, to that very public that we serve. We can't say and do some of the things that we do. But I disagree, Mr. Lester, that you have to have a child in the system. Now, I don't want to run for public office, that you have to have a child in the system. I think you have to care about the children that are in the system in order to run for school board and what have you. So I just wanted to kind of to bring that and then ask you the question, when does education begin? When does it begin, Dr. Jones? Would you answer that for me?
I think education begins before a child is ever even born.
Yes, sir.
I believe that it's incumbent upon all of us to become what it is that we wish to raise. That's my feeling.
Yes, sir. I totally agree, and I don't think enough attention has been paid to the 0 to 3 age group.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to start there. And if parents can't do it, then we have a responsibility as a community and the church to also do that. And we do have a comprehensive tutoring program, Ms. Farrow, and we do have a Spanish instructor right now. So if anybody's interested, please see me afterwards. But thank you for your time.